Solopreneurship. That is the topic of this episode. And I thought we would just kick it off with that word, even talking about what that word means. And this is going to be a bit of a different episode, more different than any podcast I've ever opened up or that I've ever hosted before, because this is going to be about a story about myself, Dan Sanchez, and my good friend and now business partner, Ken Freire,
Hey, what's up, guys?
talking about a journey that we're on around this topic of solopreneurship. And I wanted to kick it off, Ken, with even asking, what does that even mean? Like, how do you actually define it? Because I'm not even sure we're on the same page as far as to what a solopreneur is.
Yeah, a lot of people know the term entrepreneur, right? Because that's the new shiny object. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but they don't realize that there's different types of entrepreneurs. And that's where the solopreneur comes in, where it's the individual who wants to build something, but just by himself. But then that begs the question, is it always by themselves? Do they have a team at some point? Do they have contract workers? Like, what do they have? And that's why you and I, like, even as we're texting, we were even talking about this yesterday, I think, right? We're like, well, would a solopreneur have a staff at some point? And at what point does a solopreneur become an entrepreneur? Or is it overlapping? So that's why we decided to have this conversation today of like, what is a solopreneur?
Solopreneur. When I think of a solopreneur, it's definitely somebody. It's not that they're devoid of staff, but they're kind of like the main person. Like if they
Yeah.
cease to exist, the business ceases to exist. It doesn't exist without them. But it's something more than just a freelancer. I feel like a freelancer can go to solopreneur, but I feel like a solopreneur is trying to build. It's somewhere between like building a model that can exist without you and just clocking hours.
Yeah.
Like it's actually trying to build something more substantial, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like where my head's at.
Yeah, and I like to compare a solopreneur with an entrepreneur. Like an entrepreneur might have a small staff, full-time W-2 type staff, where it might be a group at least three staff, right? Where they're trying to build something, grow something, and the model for an entrepreneur is predicated on a product or a service that requires that much staff. But a solopreneur's model, it may be an online information business, it may be a coaching practice, it may be something where it doesn't require that many staff. It might require a contract like a part-time CFO or someone take a bookkeeper, but it doesn't require that much of labor.
I almost feel like a solopreneur has a little bit more of that entrepreneurial spirit, not just like a freelancer, not just like a consultant, but they have that burn in them to build something that's different, world class even, but just operated by one person.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to bring something, you're trying to burst something into the world that hasn't been done before, potentially. Or maybe it's just a different angle at doing a different business. I feel like most creators are actually solopreneurs in a lot of ways, right? Because they have to bring some kind of angle to succeed on YouTube or Instagram or whatever it might be and monetize it in a way. So like I feel like all creators are almost automatically solopreneurs because they are inventing something that wasn't before.
And I would totally agree. And I think a lot of it is all about the motivation behind the solopreneur, right? Where a solopreneur is building a lifestyle type business, where an entrepreneur, they say they want to, but it also requires so much work. I used to joke around when I used to be at a job where there was a bunch of business owners where it was like, hey, you left your 9 to 5 job only to start something that's 24/7. And that's what most entrepreneurs, they're always on the clock. They're always thinking, they're always processing it, where a solopreneur is like, no, this is a lifestyle business. How does this business fuel the life that I want? So I'm going to put the proper boundaries. I don't have anybody that I have to report to or people reporting to them, right? Because there's that pressure that when you have people reporting to you, you got to come up with the work. You got to check their work. You're always on. And you're like, I don't want to manage people. I just want to have a business that can scale, and it's just predicated within the lifestyle that I want.
Where did you first become exposed to the word solopreneur? At least maybe not even the word, but the idea of being a solopreneur.
Oh man, I would probably say easily like 10 years ago when I started to see people like Tim Ferriss, right? Where he was just kind of like building his own thing in the 4-hour work week, that kind of idea. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't even know that was possible, right? And then people like Michael Hyatt, when he first started his blog and his business, all those things, I started to think, is this even possible? Like where people are just kind of doing their own thing and one, making a massive impact, and two, also making a lot of income. Like I didn't even know that was possible. I always envisioned an entrepreneur as like building a product, like a physical product, right? Like clothing or supplements or whatever it may be. And they're going out and doing it. But just to have something where all of a sudden they're doing impact and income was very shocking to me.
Yeah, same. I was going to say my answer would have been just the 4-hour work week from
Yeah.
Tim Ferriss. I think it was a lot of people's first initial impression of solopreneurship, right? Because it was a huge like dividing line between like, yeah, usually to get rich, you'd build a company and you'd have to build it big and scale and hire people. And Tim Ferriss painted a really good picture of not doing it that way, of working only 4 hours a week. And I don't think that's necessarily the goal of all solopreneurs to only work 4 hours or even just 10 hours a week. But I think there's something mixed into that. I think that book was so successful and such a transformative book for a lot of people and setting the stage for what a solopreneur is that I think that's almost like part of why people become solopreneurs is not just to build something big and meaningful, but to do so in such a way that after grinding for a little bit, not ignoring that fact, you can actually slow down and cut your time to 40 or 30, maybe even 20 hours a week to be able to do other things.
Yeah. I mean, I worked with a coaching program that predominantly the business owners would come in and they're working 60 plus hours a week. And one of the things that we would help them do is first get to 40 hours a week, then 30, and then if they wanted to 20. And it was such a massive game changer for them to start thinking that way. Because then they started to realize they're like, they have made this business so convoluted and complex. They're like, well, if I could simplify this and have so much more time back, and at the same time have almost the same amount of profit. And like when that dawned on them, they're like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this backwards the whole time. And it was shocking to them and also revealing.
Remember the 4-hour work week was a big deal for me because I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't want to be a solopreneur. And I took that book and applied the principle to essentially become like a intrapreneur, right? Someone who was
Yep.
kind of like entrepreneurial, but within a company. And I was like working for nonprofits at the time. So I saw this as a good, noble thing. And it was. But I'm like, what if I could take my 40 hours a week and automate the crap out of all my work to get it down to where the things that we're doing at 40 hours, I'm now doing at 5 hours because it's automated or delegated. And now I have 35 more hours I could put to work for the nonprofit I'm working for and advance things forward. And I remember like my first reps, I guess, as an entrepreneur is actually just kind of having that entrepreneurial mindset, but within a company. I think you were the same, kind of hit you the
Yeah.
kind of the same way at first, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I even created my own podcast called the Intrapreneur Podcast because I was trying to figure that out, and I realized that I was getting thrust into more and more higher levels of leadership, and I needed to figure out how to accomplish all the goals. And one way was the exact same reasoning. I'm like, if I could do this job that right now takes me 20 hours and break it to 5 hours, man, I could add more to my plate, right? And I just had to think completely differently to a point where I became a dean at a university. I've been a COO. I've done a bunch of different things. Why? Because I've learned how to cut a whole bunch of wasteful productivity out of my life and just be extremely efficient and effective in it. But that 4 hour work week, that concept, all of it started to come and spawn because of this idea of like, what would it look like if we were solopreneurs? And now we're both in that journey of looking at it and saying, well, we've done this before in nonprofit spaces and in other places too. What would it look like if we were out on our own to do this and like get to this 4 hour work week or 20-hour work week model and say, how do we help others in that journey as well?
And that's kind of what is attractive about it, right? Because
Yeah.
usually people start becoming solopreneurs, one out of they're forced into it because they're let go or whatever. And they're like, well, I can either start looking for a new job or start my own thing. And one of those options is solopreneurship. And or you just get invited into it. Like you've been doing it long enough for somebody else. You're like, I think I want to build some systems and scale something for myself. I think
Yeah.
I want to take the systems and the IP that I create and the content, the email sequences and the customer service training that I put into someone else and actually build those systems that I kind of get to keep. Not
Oh
keep,
yeah.
but like, kind of like put to work for your own business. I think eventually we start getting attracted to being able to be an actual owner because we've been acting like owners inside a company. And now we're like, yeah, but actually, maybe I kind of want to be an owner.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
what's fascinating is how many times, Dan, has this happened to you? I know it's happened to me multiple times where we've been somewhere, we've worked somewhere, we've put our blood, sweat, and tears into this project, and it was a beautiful project. And then as soon as we leave, some new person comes in and just dismantles the whole project or whatever thing you
Every
did, the
time,
IP.
Ken. Every
Every
time.
time. It's so frustrating. And you're like, man, this thing is so smooth. Like you built something so beautiful. I know, I'm talking from experience, knowing something Dan built for a company we both worked at, and it's like, man, we could have taken that and we could have distributed it to so many other companies that could have flourished with it. And that's how a lot of times solopreneurs rise to the occasion, right? Because they're like, wait a minute, I've built something in one place that I'm pretty sure could be replicatable in other places if I put the time and effort to it.
So there's a lot of advantages to being a solopreneur, right? Obviously, like there's financial upside because you get to, if you can build your own systems and you knew how to do it before in a company and you go out on your own, sure, there's always something to learn, things you don't know about other parts of the business, maybe that you haven't been exposed to. And there's some risk and it's hard to get up and running. But once you have it up and running, you get to keep it and it gets to earn money for you. But what are some of the downsides you see often with the people you've coached running their own businesses?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that most solopreneurs that I know or coaches, they do have some extroversion type personalities. So then they're trying to do this extroverted type thing, and but they're by themselves. They have no team. They have no one to collaborate with, and it becomes so difficult for them because they're like, I just need to help process some stuff with. So, like for example, I worked at Michael Hyatt's company, Full Focus. I was the director of certification there, and I oversaw all their coaches. And I can't tell you how many times coaches would just reach out to me and they're like, hey, can you just help me process this for like 10, 15 minutes? And I'm like, sure, and within 5 minutes, I helped them solve the problem. And they're like, oh my gosh, I've been stuck here for days just thinking about this one problem. So that's one thing. The second one, too, is that for a lot of them, they're actually good at one aspect of the business. For coaches, they might be really good at coaching. But what they don't realize is that they might not be good at the marketing part, the sales part, or the operations part, right? Or the actual leading of contractors. There's so many other things that come into play that they don't realize. And they're like, oh my gosh, now I'm scrambling to try to figure out how to do all these things. And it becomes so difficult and so overwhelming so fast that they almost get paralyzed by it and end up not doing the things that they really want to do.
To me, it's kind of the exciting part. There's a book, and this comes out of the 4 Hour Work Week. It's kind of like the number one recommended book out of the 4 Hour Work Week is the book called The E Myth,
Oh, yeah.
right?
I
You
love that
have
book.
like you have the technician, you have the manager, and you have the entrepreneur. When you don't realize when you become a business owner, you have to be all three. But you start off usually as the technician. You're good at the thing, but you don't know how to build the systems like the entrepreneur or manage said systems like the manager. And it's a struggle to maintain the balance of all three until you realize that you need to manage all three. Are you saying most coaches and consultants are just stuck in technician mode most of the time?
Oh, yeah, 100%. They're stuck in that area, and most of them don't know where to even begin when it comes to marketing and sales, right? And this is anyone who's in the coaching consultant realm. Most of them are not marketing coaches or consultants. They are lifestyle coaches, productivity coaches, business coaches. And you would think business coaches know marketing or sales. I'll use myself as an example. I've led marketing teams. I know a lot of the theory about marketing and what to do. But then I need to start go to actually do marketing, right? Like how to set up websites or how to do things. It gets overwhelming really fast. I mean, I kid you guys not. The text thread between Dan and I, 90% is me asking Dan how to go do something. He's like, go ask ChatGPT first now. uh, uh, but it happens, right? Like it's just like trying to like actually execute on certain things becomes a little bit more difficult.
It's funny you bring up ChatGPT because I feel like that's become a big change that's changing the game. Imagine if Tim Ferriss had AI back when he wrote the 4 Hour Work Week,
Oh my gosh, dude.
how that might change that book. A lot of people ask him to rewrite the book, and he's actually been republishing on his podcasts, he's like, instead of me publishing what I would change about the 4-hour work week, he's been doing the reverse and being like, here's what I wouldn't change. And he's publishing the
Mm.
principles or the chapters that are good, which is a great. Part of me still wonders what he would change though.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think that's kind of what I'm curious about, because now with AI, it's changing the game for solopreneurs completely, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the things that it took me hours to do, now I can do in minutes, right? For example, I was talking to a friend of mine, one of the clients I'm helping him build out his coaching program. And I started using ChatGPT and I realized I could build a custom ChatGPT for every individual who's stuck trying to figure out how to build their programs, especially because I oversaw accreditation at a university at some point. I know how to think very programmatically.
Yep.
It's something I really enjoy doing. And I was like, oh my gosh, when I was at the university overseeing accreditation, this took me months to try to get everybody in the university on board with, to try to solidify, here are the objectives for this program. Literally months, because everybody had to check it off. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I had ChatGPT 4 or 5 years ago, would have taken me a week. I was like, it changes the game completely. Like, so much time to save, a whole bunch of people who are trying to figure out how to write their courses, how to write the curriculum, all that stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, it's such a game changer. And I think solopreneurs can finally start to see a little bit light at the end of the tunnel when they feel so overwhelmed by that feeling of like, I have so much to do and I don't know where to get started.
In the book, The 4-Hour Work Week, he talks a lot about like his process for essentially getting down to 4 hours a week. And it starts with, first, eliminate
Yep.
things that are unnecessary, then automate what's left. And for what can't be eliminated, what can't be automated, you then take to delegate. You maybe hire he was big into like remote assistance, right?
Yep.
Hire someone from the Philippines that can take a step-by-step instructions or a decision tree diamond to like work through things. Whatever's left over from that is the stuff only you can do. The thing
Yeah.
that's funny about it though is with AI, a lot more can move from stuff only you can do to automate. And a lot of stuff that you had to delegate before can now go to automate, which is a big difference. Because before, like if I wanted to have a phone number for someone to call in and ask some questions and book a meeting, well, I would have had to hire someone to do that. There's no way a chatbot would have been able to do that 5 years ago. And all the chatbots that swore they do it like Drift 5 years ago are just complete crap, and were horrible experiences. But now voice agents can take those calls, sound good. You don't even have to pretend like they're not AI. Let it say that it's AI, but it'll handle questions, maybe even customize the answers to their situation, and book meetings or send them documents or do whatever they need to do in order. They can take a few actions now. Imagine years from now, they'll be really good. That's going to change the game. I think you and I both ran into the situation where, because we were working together and you were sales and I was marketing, I generate too many leads and sales can't follow up with them all.
Oh,
Still bitter
yeah.
about that. Why can't you answer the phone at 2 a.m., Ken?
I'm like, because I think the person would get mad at me. No, but that's, I mean, if you think about it, there are so many people who are getting leads that they're burning through leads. There's a statistic that I'm trying to remember the exact statistic, but I think it goes by like 48% or something like that. The increase that someone would close if you actually call them within the first 60 seconds that they request information. Right. And I remember thinking that and being like, oh my gosh, that would be awesome if we could manage to do that. And we couldn't. It was just so, like, we tried. It was so hard. We were like in 5 minutes. Right. But now with AI, you could pull that off with no problem at all. And
At
it's,
least you can have people calling inbound. You offer a call to action on email and be like, call. Answer. My AI bot's really good. It will answer your questions and book a meeting.
yep.
If you don't believe me, try it. Like you can push them a little bit to do it because it's still so new. But it's just opening up options that weren't available. Things that you would have had to have had at least, a staff of 3, 4, 5. Don't need to be 3, 4, 5. And I'm not saying like you don't ever hire people, because there's a lot of things that only people will ever be able to do and AI will never be able to do, but it's making it possible to actually scale like solopreneurs have never been able to scale before.
Yeah. I mean, as we're talking, some people may never want to ever use AI in the current state that it is for sales, right? Like the inbound calls and inbound. And we get that they're like, no, that's too much, right? But we want to open up your eyes to show you that you can use AI and automate so many other parts of your process. If you're a solopreneur, especially as a coach, that like you can find ways to figure out like, hey, marketing copy, right? You might not be great at it, but now AI could at least make it a little bit better for you, or if not a whole lot better. But you don't need to go hire that out, right? Or like sales copy or a sales script. Like there's so many things that it could do and automate. It could automate a lot of your social media content. It's just a plethora of things. Anything that you are doing repeatable, AI can probably start to take over for you and save you a ton of time.
At least do some of it.
Yeah.
There's an idea floating out in the market in the AI space specifically that AI is so good and it's getting better all the time that within the next 5, maybe 10 years, I think it'll be more like 5, that we will see our first solo billionaire. That means a one-person company, maybe with some contractors, maybe they have a bookkeeper. I'm not saying they don't have any staff, but it's essentially a one-person company that scales to $1 billion in
That's with a
annual
B
revenue.
as a boy.
A B, yeah. That
That's
is absurd.
crazy.
It is crazy. Right now, I could think of a few companies that are doing like 15 million as a solo, and they're the most efficient companies. Like they're generally like code based,
Yeah.
like Card, that simple website builder with the 2 R's in the card.co, I think is one of those companies where I think he said at least 15 million just selling basic landing pages. But because it's a really simple product, and he's got enough people paying him $15 a year that you really just didn't need a lot.
Yeah.
So, but there will be somebody that hits $1 billion, and they'll probably be a freak of nature. They'll probably be an Elon Musk level crazy smart person.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to think about that. Like, man, for some people, if they would hit 1 million, that'd be like they're on top of the world. 10 million, they feel like a rock star. 100 million is like, dude, what are you doing? 1 billion is like, it's actually hard for me to fathom that today. But 5-10 years from now, the way AI is going, everything like that, like we were just talking about sales, right? Imagine if your sales was completely automated by AI. Right now, I know some people are going to be creeped out by that, but it's going to get there at some point. It's going to be better than me at closing, right? Like it's going to happen. And like when it does, it's going to change the landscape of so many things. But imagine having AI that doesn't get tired of doing sales calls, that can always close. You can get to 1 billion. Like I could imagine that. And that's going to be wild.
And while that'll be very exciting, and it'll be an ethical business, and we'll be applauding them, and maybe they're freaks. Maybe there's a reason why they're solo because they're horrible with people. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they're scared of people. But what's really exciting about that to me is that if one or a few people even make it to $1 billion as a solopreneur, I'm like, oh, you know what that means? It makes it a lot easier to make it to 100 million. Makes it a heck of a lot easier to make it to 10 million. It makes it on easy pilot to get to 1 million. You're like, with AI, now that you can delegate so much of the operations, provided you have the right target and the right offer, like you should be able to scale beyond 100K, which is where a lot of coaches and consultants are at, around that 6-figure mark, and get to 7 figures because they can free up the time to actually work on the business and not get stuck doing all the other business tasks. They could do the parts that only they're good at, which is honestly the most exciting thing about what it means to be a solopreneur right now.
Yeah. And that's the stuff that, as you and I have been talking for a while now, that we're like, imagine all these coaches and consultants out there and even counselors that like we put all of them in the bucket of solopreneur, right? Or imagine if those people can almost have a simple framework or a simple process where it's like they're hitting that $1 million marker. No longer 6-figure where they're grinding and they're struggling through all the like nights and weekends, having to do the administrative stuff, because all of a sudden they forgot about this little task that needs to get done the next day. It's like, man, that stuff could be on autopilot. They could be present with their families, right? They can be present at the hobbies that they're in. They can go do more hobbies. They could go impact their communities and societies. For those who are faith-based, like you and I are, right? Like we could be involved in our churches more. There's so much opportunity there, right? This is just a means to an end. And that's what I get really excited about, like how many people we can influence and help by getting them to start thinking differently by utilizing and implementing AI-driven systems.
And to me, it almost becomes way more fun because I'm
Yeah.
definitely the kind of person that likes to work on the business, not in the business.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're a solopreneur, that's practically impossible, right? Because every time you land new deals, who gets to implement it? You. Who gets to onboard it? You. Who gets to like offboard clients? You. Like everything's dependent on you. But like with AI, like yeah, you're still going to be in there, but like not nearly as much anymore. It depends on the business model. 'Cause some of them require a lot less of you. Some of them require a ton of you, right? But we're dealing with coaches and consultants. But imagine if you don't have to do all the other stuff, where all the business admin are related to it, and you just have to show up to the call and add the value, and even all the stuff you do on the back ends, like sped up with things like ChatGPT in order to provide the value you provide. All of a sudden, we're talking about like a totally different world. Where you could just do the part that you actually love doing. Like
Yeah.
me thinking about working on a business is a lot more fun. Or even just doing what we're doing right now, like showing up and creating a podcast episode. I'm like, this is my favorite part. I would do this even if I didn't wasn't trying to do it for money. I like making podcasts. I do it for free.
Oh, yeah.
If I
All the
could just
time.
do this, this would be my thing. Just talking shop, teaching people things. But I think a lot of coaches and consultants are the same way. Like they have the things they like to do. And if we could scale while also being solo, that's kind of the dream.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, one of the messy things about scaling is that it requires more grinding sometimes. And that grinding with, if you're not careful, could lead to too much hustling to then burn out. And that beautiful dream that you have of trying to hit that, we're going back to the Tim Ferriss, that 4-hour work week, but like, even if it's a 30-hour work week, right? Or 20-hour work week, whatever that number is, whatever your dreams are, your aspirations are, many people miss it because they're scaling the wrong way. And that's where I think what we get excited is like, if we could bring people into their sweet spots, their desire zones, where they are like in their working genius, all of a sudden people are going to be thriving more. That's what I get excited for. Like, oh man, they're hitting it. Like you and I, we could get on podcasts. I could be teaching people, coaching people. Man, you get me in a coaching conversation, I feel alive all day, right? Like I'm like happy, I'm giddy, I'm excited. But if I have to go in and be in the weeds of like checking 500 emails, I'm like, oh my gosh, shoot me, right? Like I'm done. I'm tired. I don't want to do that, right? Like I've put my work into that. And I know a lot of coaches that feel the same way. They're like, man, I've done all those things. I don't want to do those things. I just want to help people. And that's what, Dan, I think you and I are really excited about, helping these individuals, because now we can get them to a place where if they build the right systems, they build the right foundations, they're going to be really excited about being able to just focus on the things that they love.
And I think that's kind of the journey and the point of this whole podcast is taking this idea of solopreneur and figuring out like what the next leg of this journey looks like. What does a solopreneur look like 10 years from now? And how do we start building that? How do we start building the processes? If Tim Ferriss were born in our generation and now trying to figure this out, actually it'd probably be, he started early, so he'd have to be Gen Z. Like if Tim Ferriss were taking another swing at this, what would the playbook look like for that?
Yeah.
Because I think that book would look quite a bit different with AI in it. Same principles, but the approach would be different.
Yeah.
We want to figure out what that is. And I think we know a lot of it already because we've experienced some of it. I'm obviously really AI driven, even got the little AI sign up in my podcast studio. But there's going to be a lot of change as technology improves in the future. And I'm excited to build the systems and not just build them for ourselves, but talk about how other people can use them too.
Yeah, for sure. And I, one thing that I think this podcast is going to be super helpful for, and Dan, you and I have been talking a lot about this, is that as we are walking through this journey of figuring out what works and what doesn't, it's for a lot of solopreneurs, right? They're alone. They are doing this by themselves. They're trying to figure it out. And they're hearing so much noise about, you should do this, you should do that, you should do X, Y, Z. And it's like, that you don't even know where to start. It's like, we love playing around with that stuff. We don't mind doing those things. We're going to test those things out for them and be like, hey, this actually works. This doesn't. Or from our experience, we can tell them right away, like, don't try that. It's not going to work. I've worked with now for the last several years, I've worked with like over 500 coaches. And I just quickly, sometimes they come up with an idea or a marketing idea. And I'm like, please don't do that. You're going to waste your money. Like, you're not at that place now. And when I told them that, they're like, oh my gosh, thank you. I just needed so much, someone to like help me think through this. And we bring that experience. The reason I say all that is because you may be a solopreneur, but what we want you to feel is that you're not alone. So you may be solo, but you're not alone. And that's what this podcast is going to help you think about, is not to be alone in this journey of solopreneurship, and actually have other people guiding you, walking with you, and empowering you to keep your vision alive so that you can do the things that you want to do and get the impact and the income and the freedom that you want in life. That's the goal. That's the premise. That's ultimately what we want to help people with.
It's kind of counterintuitive. You're going it alone, but really you can't.
Yeah.
You might be the sole owner of your business, but you shouldn't be doing the journey alone. And that's kind of the counterintuitive point. I think probably one of the biggest misunderstandings. That's probably going to be a whole nother episode right there.
Yeah.
Like,
We'll make that another episode.
Misconceptions of solopreneurship. That's number one. But solo, not alone. Thank you for listening to this first episode. And I hope you continue listening and join us on this journey as we explore the next evolution of what it means to be a solopreneur.